allow representatives and candidates to just do their job and represent the public good.
Joan from Palmyra.
Yeah, they pretty much answered that question at the beginning. It was just in reference to the town halls. Is there any way that I could switch that and just ask, what do you guys feel about the ethanol in our gas and how well it's destroying our engines?
Ursula.
Well, unfortunately, that's not an issue that I'm very aware of. I don't know if a lot of you know this. I'm a bicyclist. I'm someone on a fixed income, and until this campaign started, I didn't even own a car. It was donated by a family member, an old pickup truck that was in the family, because I can't get from Syracuse to Kansas County or Wayne County on my bicycle. And so I'll pass this one on to Anne Marie.
It means you don't have a lawnmower though either? You just have goats? I mean, it's small and it's even harder on, so.
Sure, I've got another minute left here. I believe that we need to be thinking about ways to transition to not having to be so reliant on vehicles. And so I think that, I favor things like increasing funding for public transportation. I think of like the great cities in our country and around the world, and these are places that people have access to public transportation. And I would love to be able to hop on some kind of train and just get here in an efficient way to this town hall meeting in Ontario. I think it would be great. I could go over my notes instead of having to ask someone else to drive me. So, like I said, I cannot answer the question about ethanol because I don't use a lot of gas.
I think ethanol subsidies are just a classic example of the government getting involved and the unintended consequences now when you look at the price of corn syrup, corn, and food, and the impact that it's had. But I do want to go back to corporations and peoples. Let's talk about, Ursula brought up Constellation. How many people does Constellation employ here in Wayne County?
500 and some odd.
And what is the impact of that in this community, economically, businesses, stores, churches? They certainly are people. Maybe not in the legal sense. Corporation is a legal fiction, as Ursula said. But when you take away that title, we are talking about people. When a corporation or a company supports me, and at the federal level, that's why there are PACs, but you can't accept any corporate money. But when the U.S. Chamber of Commerce supports me, or the National Federation of Independent Businesses supports me, or Constellation Energy supports me, it's because I support policies that are good for the economy, that are good for jobs, that are good for the American people. And what we should be all focused on is how we're going to get this economy back on track, how we're going to help out here in Wayne County the farmers who lost 60–70% of their apple crop, which it's, you talk about hurting the economy, so they lost their apple crop, so then apple storage becomes an issue, and all the folks who relied on that for packaging, apple packaging. So all of these trickle-down effects. Corporations are people, and the support I've gotten is because of, I believe that we as a government have got to get out of the way, where we've got to let the American people get back to doing what they do best. And that's job creation. That is putting people back to work. But the regulations and the taxes that this government has put on our business owners in this country are really what's keeping this economy down, along with the uncertainty that we've created in this government. We don't know how the Affordable Care Act is going to affect businesses. We don't know what tax rates are going to be. That affects families, businesses, across the board. Everyone's kind of hunkered down waiting to see what their tax rates are going to be at the end of this year or first of next year. And the government has not done a good job of that. It's something really, I can't say it enough or emphasize it enough. This election is about jobs and the economy. It's about being able to keep our kids home. I talked about my 6 kids, none of them living in upstate New York because there are no jobs here. We can do better. We can do better. We can do better with much better policies from the federal government.
David Brookins. Another question about Hillary.
Yes, and you addressed this earlier a little bit, but I thought it was really convenient that Secretary Clinton, now it's all her fault, and I just hope it won't stop there. My question is, do you expect the Oversight Committee to call in Secretary Clinton and ask her a little bit more about how our security was so lax and how that contributed to the death of those 4 Americans?
Yes.
And will the committee do this before the election or after the election?
I've heard rumblings from the chairman, Darrell Issa, who has said he will subpoena both the Secretary of State and Susan Rice, the ambassador. Because that's another issue. I think a lot of people who ask the ambassador to go around and specifically blame this YouTube video. However, I don't know, quite honestly, if that will occur before the election. I know that there's a tremendous effort being made to have it occur before the election, but unfortunately, it may be difficult to achieve.
Well, I'm not really sure that's a question that was directed to both of us, or if it was just a question to Anne Marie, who does have a lot of, it seems to be had a lot of information about this issue. But I will go back to something that Anne Marie did say earlier, related to security and the role of government in security, and to a falsehood that she really stated earlier, that 9/11 was not provoked by something that we did. And I thought 9/11 was a tragic moment. I watched it in my high school. We were just preparing to go into a mass. I went to Catholic school. And we saw this image on the television screen, and it was just a shock of how many lives were going to be lost. But then I learned more about U.S. history and the history of U.S. involvement in other countries. And I learned of an episode where in the 1950s, the U.S. government and the CIA were directly involved in the overthrow of a democratically elected leader in Iran that led to the installation of a brutal regime by the Shah of Iran that was eventually overthrown during the Islamic Revolution. So U.S. intervention of this sort directly fuels extremism and anti-American sentiment. And so we can't say that we are free from having done anything to provoke this. And I would never say that it was right, but we have to be honest about the role that the U.S. has played in the rest of the world. And then once again, in the 1980s, we armed the government of Saddam Hussein to fight the Iranians. Once again, unnecessary meddling in the affairs of other countries and fueling conflict in a very volatile region. And we talk about democracy and Israel being a beacon of democracy and freedom in the Middle East. And we have to be honest once again that the government of South Africa has identified that Israel upholds an apartheid regime and denies basic citizenship rights to their Arab Palestinian citizens. So I think there are myths that are being perpetuated by the leadership in our government right now that is unwilling to admit the mistakes that we have made. And I think this is, like I said, it's a bipartisan consensus in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And there is more concern for empire building than looking at true long-term security for us. And so that's why I support a change in U.S. foreign policy that would be focused on diplomacy and strong intelligence, because we have to face the fact that our current and our past actions have fueled terrorists that are already in the pipeline planning things against the U.S., which is unfortunate. And so that's why we need good intelligence, but we also need to be focusing on how can we have relationships in the world that are not based on force and meddling.
This will be the last question. I'm informed. Jessica Maxwell.
Great. I'm going to alter my question just a little bit because it was also getting at energy independence, which you've addressed a little bit. And I wanted to focus a little bit deeper on the nuclear issue. And you commented, Anne Marie, that it should be a level playing field and we shouldn't be raising one above the other. But nuclear really only exists because of the federal subsidies, particularly the Price-Anderson Act and others. And I think we've seen the industry really struggling, and right now there are no private corporations that would invest in nuclear without massive federal subsidies. The second piece that I'd like to highlight on that in terms of energy independence is right now we're getting 70% of our uranium from foreign countries. So I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to how does nuclear really fit into a scenario of energy independence, given that, and given its inability after 60 years of subsidies to stand on its own. Well, I go first, right?
Yep.
I agree with everything this lovely woman just said, and I support phasing out nuclear reactors in the U.S. because of the reasons stated, and I think it's also important to look at the effects on cancer rates that nuclear power reactors have. I was approached after our recent Oswego town hall meeting by a woman that said, I wish you had talked about cancer and nuclear power because so many people in my family that live in Oswego have cancer. And I think, you know, we have these reactors around here that are the exact same model as the nuclear power reactor in Fukushima. And the containments that are supposed to prevent the leaking of radiation in Fukushima failed, and there's no guarantee that they could not fail here. And so I think the reign of nuclear power has to end, and we also have to stop promoting nuclear power in other countries, because ultimately things in a nuclear power plant can be used to make nuclear weapons. So I think it's a lose-lose kind of energy source, and we just have to move forward without nuclear power.
I disagree. I think that nuclear power is a clean, reliable, safe source. I do agree with you in regards to the government subsidies. Those all have to be looked at, but that's about leveling the playing field for everyone. And I think we do that best with a revised tax code, a tax code that lowers the a revised tax code that lowers the rates, that eliminates all these loopholes, and that puts everyone on a level playing field. Ursula continues to bring up Fukushima. Fukushima did not and was not as current as they could have been, and was the reason why they could have withstood the tsunami as well as the earthquake had they been up to code. But I want to say something, and that is, I've heard Ursula now, we've been in 2 town halls, citing studies, citing facts with no backing them. And I think it's when we talk about issues that are so emotional and so people feel so passionately about, I think we've got to be careful to stick with the facts, and we've got to, bring in and, can we, and I think this is, can we directly relate cancer to nuclear power? Or is the incidence of cancer up everywhere? My father died of cancer. We don't live near a nuclear power plant. So making sure that what we say, and there's causation, and that we're factual, because these issues are important to everybody. And whether it's our energy source or whether it's our health in this country, they're issues that we have got to be responsible about, and we've got to just talk about the facts and not conjecture and not kind of hypothesize or refer to sort of studies that are done without providing the studies, without providing the background. I think that for all of you and for people who are paying attention to the issues, I think that's what we have to do, and we have to have discussions that are backed by facts and not emotions, and then you make your decisions on who you're going to vote for.
It's time for closing statements, since Anne-Marie started. The first closing statement.
How much time do we have?
3 minutes?
Is it 2?
Yeah, that's what the openings were, so that'll be fine.
Great. So glad that we're clear on the format. Well, so thank you so much for your time and your questions. And there were a lot of questions that came up in the last town hall that didn't come up in this one. And so I think it just shows that there's a lot of diversity in our district, and I really welcome these kinds of opportunities to meet folks face to face and to answer your questions. And I'll just say that I think it's really important I think it's a little bit of a response to Anne-Marie's final comment, is that there's science, and science is very important, and I support science. And then there's also the lived experiences of each of us and the lived experiences of people in this district. And so, whether it's the rancher on Route 14 that I met with that is really concerned about climate change because his cows eat grass and there's a drought this year, or whether it's folks that are living near nuclear power plants that are concerned about cancer rates. I think that yes, I support the studies, and for our next town hall, I will have the papers in hand to support my positions. But I also believe in the lived experience of every person in this district, and so that's why I really welcome people's comments. I will be continuing to participate in these town hall meetings, and I will be in the debates. And I would welcome talking with any of you after the town hall. I would encourage you to visit my website and to see that my campaign does provide positive solutions that are very different from what is being articulated by my opponents. I believe that there is room for government to help the economy right now, because face it, we don't have work. Private business just isn't hiring, and so someone has to work for the general welfare. And there is a statement in the Constitution that the federal government needs to be responsible for providing for the common welfare. And right now, I think too many people are hurting. And so I would invite you to visit ursulaforcongress.com to see some of the proposals that I have to really move us forward and not backward.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming, for being here. Jim, thank you for hosting. Bob, thank you for allowing us to use the town hall. Ursula, for participating. You know, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, this campaign is going to have two very different visions for the United States of America. I think Ursula, and I will speak for Dan because I can look at his record. It's one thing to look at a candidate, it's another thing to look at someone's record. And Dan's record is about government intervention, government spending, the stimulus, the Affordable Care Act document. So we kind of know Dan believes that the government has the answers, and I believe very differently. And I think that the answers to this economy and to jobs, the answer to getting the United States of America back to its exceptionalism, to where she belongs, is really lies with the private sector and it lies with the American people. And we should decrease the size of government, and when we decrease the size of government, we allow the American people to have more freedoms, we allow the American people and companies and small businesses and job creators to keep more money in their pocket. And when we allow them to hang on to that capital, they will create jobs, they will buy new equipment, they will go out and expand their business. But we have created such a fog of doubt with this federal government, with the regulations, with the uncertainty about taxes, with this Affordable Care Act. It's like a wet blanket on our economy. And the only way we're going to lift that wet blanket, that oppressive obstacle that the government puts in the way of the job creators, is to rely on the American people and to say the strength of this nation is not because of that federal government. It's because of the people like yourselves who get up every day, work hard, raise their families, and do the right thing. And I have faith in the American people. I think we can turn this economy around by growing the private sector and shrinking the size of government. Before I end, I want to say thank you all very much. I know we have veterans in this room today. If you could all stand, we'd like to say thank you for your service in this country. Together, please keep in your thoughts and prayers the men and women of the military who serve our nation and keep us safe. Despite all of the problems this nation has, we remain the greatest nation in the history of the world. It's because of the service and the sacrifice of the men and women of the military and our veterans. And I neglected to introduce the Wayne County Board of Supervisors. If you would all like to stand up. It was very nice of you to be here today.
I'd just like to add my thanks to all of you for coming, and a reminder, Election Day is November 6th. And this is our opportunity to participate and to shape our government, and if we don't exercise our right to vote, it's going to get taken away from us. So please take that responsibility and vote. A special thank you to Ursula for being here. You're always welcome to come back. And Anne-Marie, thank you. And thank you.
One more thing.